Hello and welcome to today's Bible study. Today we're asking the question, how to live a beautiful and joyful life. And it's based on Galatians chapter 5, verses 16 to 26. And I recommend that if you haven't already read this passage, that you pause the video and read it. Okay. A young Chinese woman live-streamed on social media scenes of herself chatting and flirting with friends in different exotic locations around her city. Every day, she projected such a desirable and positive life online that she became an overnight Chinese internet celebrity. But the stress of trying to maintain the make-believe image she created was so great that she ended up wrecking her health, her job, and her real relationships. On social media like Facebook, Instagram, WeChat, and so on, many try to project an image of themselves that is relentlessly happy, positive, full of fun and friends. We click and share moments of time capturing images of our lives for friends and the world to admire. Everyone, from celebrities to teens, want people to like them and follow them. Many strive to create and manipulate situations and themselves in order to project a happy, beautiful, successful, and exciting life so that others will admire and envy them. If you want a sweet, juicy peach, you have to wait for it to ripen on a tree. You can't just manufacture a fruit. You can only grow it. The qualities that create a fulfilling and joyful life are like fruits. We all want to live happy, beautiful, and joy-filled lives in real life. But the catch is that the more you work to create such a life for yourself, the further you find yourself from achieving it. Infuriatingly, others seem to have it, and even if you have what they have and do what they do, the goal of a happy, beautiful, and fulfilling life slips through your fingers even as you grasp it. So what's the answer? The personal qualities that make your life fun, happy, and fulfilling cannot be manufactured. You can project a superficial image of these qualities for the world to see, but the inner reality cannot be manufactured. You can't make a fruit. You can only grow it. Now, in the passage from Paul's letter to the Galatians, he contrasts the works of the flesh and the fruit of the Spirit. The works of the flesh are all those horrible, negative behaviors and characteristics nobody in their right mind wants, but also often suffer from. Paul calls them works because they are the result of strain and stress and striving and ceaseless toil. In contrast, when you think of fruit, you think of quietness, sunshine, and gradual ripening. The tree does not strain to produce fruit, and it doesn't bear fruit for itself to enjoy, but for others to eat and enjoy. The purpose of fruit is to multiply and produce more fruit. One of the main reasons Jesus asked the Father to send his disciples the Holy Spirit is so that their lives will bear much fruit. And you'll find that in John chapter 15. Okay, now let's look at each of the 9 fruits of the Holy Spirit. Paul starts the list with love. The Greek word he uses is agape. This word, used in the New Testament to describe unconditional life, especially the unconditional love of God for man. Our response to God's unconditional love should be to love him unconditionally and love our neighbour. Now, this is different from phileo, which means love between friends, and philautia, which is self-love. When Jesus said, God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, John 3:16, he used the word agape. Likewise, when Jesus said, love the Lord your God and love your neighbour, in Matthew 16:37-38, he used the word agape. knowing and experiencing God's love for us through Jesus comes by walking in the Spirit. Now, to walk in the Spirit, we must first believe and commit our lives to Jesus. Then Jesus and the Father will send the Holy Spirit to the believer. Jesus said in John 14:16-17, "And I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate, who will never leave you. He is the Holy Spirit, who leads into all truth. The world cannot receive him, because it isn't looking for him and doesn't recognize him. But you know him, because he lives with you now, and later will be in you." When the Holy Spirit fills the believer, he brings gifts of power to enable the believer to proclaim the good news of Jesus. This is what happened at Pentecost to the disciples. Then, as we open ourselves and surrender our lives step by step to serve the Lord, the Holy Spirit dwelling in us starts to influence every part of our lives. And this is what Paul calls walking in the Spirit. It all sounds a little complicated when broken down like this, but the reality is that it can all happen simply and naturally to anyone who desires to serve the Lord and be filled with his Holy Spirit. All the other 8 fruits of the Spirit flow out from this first fruit of agape love. When you experience God's unconditional love, you feel joy. And joy isn't necessarily outward happiness and laughter, even though we often express the joy in our heart in this way. Joy is a sense of inner optimism and certainty, so that even in times of great hardship or suffering, you will still know in your heart God's abiding love. It's like an inner warmth that is continually replenished, no matter how cold it gets outside. God's love and joy produces peace. Now, peace is best pictured as an inner quietness and tranquility. The assurance of God's love and the experience of joy means that there is no need to strive or be anxious about anything. We have peace. Next come 3 related fruits: long-suffering, which is sometimes translated as patience, but this word in English misses the real power of this quality, which is courage to endure and not give up. This fruit is made possible by the fruit of love, joy, and peace. Knowing the love of God and having the joy and peace of the Lord in your heart, why would you give up on God? What could you possibly gain that you don't already have? Now, the 5th fruit is gentleness, and it's also translated as kindness in some versions. Because you have love, joy, and peace, you have an inner security and assurance, and so you are able to be gentle. There's no need to be domineering or demanding in your relationships with others, even those who oppose you or argue against you. To be gentle doesn't mean you roll over and give in to others' demands. A solid rock doesn't hit back, but it is quietly unyielding. The next fruit in this group is the fruit of goodness. Goodness can be defined as love in action. Jesus' famous parable about the Samaritan who helped the man who had been beaten and robbed in Luke 10:29-37 is an example of goodness. The Samaritan shows the victim God's unconditional love in very practical ways. Loving your neighbor means showing someone God's love in practical ways that bless them. The last group of 3 fruits are faithfulness, meekness, which is sometimes translated humility or gentleness, and self-control. One way of describing faithfulness is dependability. Jesus illustrates this fruit in the parable about the faithful steward, and you'll find that in Luke chapter 12, verses 42 to 44. The servant carries out the master's instructions just as if the master were present, even though the master had been away a long time and the servant had no idea he would return. Meekness is often confused with weakness because it sounds almost the same, but it's the exact opposite of weakness. A meek person uses the power and authority God has given him or her according to God's will. A meek person is one who submits themselves to the will of God. Now, God gave Moses great power and authority, but Moses used it as the Lord directed, and so he was described as very meek, and you'll find that in Numbers chapter 12, verse 3. And I recommend you read this chapter 12 if you want to see meekness in action. Jesus, with all the power and authority given to him, only used it according to the Father's will. And he said of himself, I am meek and lowly. It's in Matthew 11:29. Finally, we come to the fruit called self-control, also translated temperance. Self-control is simply the control of physical appetites and desires. And this is really only possible when you know that the Lord who loves you will satisfy you with all good things in the right way. And you'll find that in Psalm 36, verse 8. Fruits of the Spirit enable anyone to enjoy a beautiful and fulfilled life. Such a life does not depend on money, social status, or lots of likes on social media. Anyone who believes in Jesus is filled by the Holy Spirit and sincerely tries to do what God requires of them will grow the fruits of the Spirit in their life. At first, they may be immature, small, green and hard. Don't expect every fruit to ripen in your life at the same time. Remember too that the fruit is not for yourself. You may not always be aware of the different fruits of the Spirit maturing in your life, but those around you will notice and will want what you have. Now, if you'd like to dig deeper by thinking about and meditating on some questions, here's about 4 questions that you may like to think about. Firstly, if you use social media like Facebook, how do you choose the photos of yourself, family and friends to upload? Secondly, do you think you have to be a Christian to live a beautiful, joyful and fulfilling life? Thirdly, which of the 9 fruits of the Spirit do you personally find the most attractive? And why? Why is that? Is there a fruit that doesn't attract you? And fourthly, is there anything you can do to speed up the ripening of the fruits of the Spirit in your life? And you may like to read Luke chapter 8, verses 11 to 15 as you think about this question. Thank you for listening and being with me today. I pray that you will have a blessed life and that the fruits of the Spirit will mature in you as you love and serve the Lord. Until next time, goodbye.